Tonight, we talk fairy and faefolk. It's time to get uncanny.
This Uncanny Earth is dedicated to the memory of Todd David Anderson.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 181, Fairy and Faefolk. Tonight, that will be up for discussion. As always, I'm your host, Robert Solomon, and with me is the man that makes the world go round. What world that is, I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Spider.
Does that make me the Candyman? Because that's that song from Willy Wonka.
I thought, would that make you the Candyman that, killed all those girls in that movie?
That's probably the more likely, but, I'm not full of bees.
But I don't think he was full of bees either. I think it was just he took the plasmid from Bioshock.
Oh, okay, yeah, so he just with bees. The angry bees with dogs in their mouth. And when they open their mouth, they shoot bees with dogs. No.
Yes, that's exactly what happens.
That's an old Simpsons
excellent
joke right there. Old Simpsons.
Very old. Very old. The funniest one was when he kept falling down the mountain after they put him in the ambulance, and then he fell down the mountain again. That was quite amazing, if you want my honest opinion about things. So
yeah, there's an awkward silence after that, I think. It showed up real quick.
You got real quiet. People I don't know why I tune into this mess every week. Because you love us. That's why you tune into this mess every week. Just be honest with yourself and be honest with us. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our favorite time of the show, including my host because he really loves it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Dad Jokes.
It's time for Dad Jokes. I only really like that one part, and now that part's over, so...
That's just because you like hearing the sound of your own voice.
I do, sometimes.
Sometimes. I can understand that. Why don't fairies live under toadstools?
I don't think I've heard this one, but I have a feeling that I'm going to hate it.
Because there's not mushroom.
I have heard a version of this joke, but it wasn't as clean as that.
Probably very not
funny. Probably not. I'm just going to leave that there. The other one was funnier.
What are you going to do? You win some, you lose some, You could even... I'll throw in another dad joke for free.
Oh, thanks.
And just say this. Rapunzel is not a fairy tale. It's a hairy tale.
That one's not really painful. More just kind of that one's disappointing because you could have done better. I'm just gonna say that.
It's off the website. I don't know what you want.
That's not an ego booster. That's an ego kind of puller downer.
That's all right. That's what we're here for, right? We do a little bit of both on each episode. we raise the stakes and then we 100% lower them, and then we raise them back up again with our topics. So it's kind of a
low expectations. Situation. That's what the show should be called. Low expectations.
Low expectations. We know the old jingle. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are talking about fairy and faefolk. Before we begin our deep conversation into it, do we have any business that we would like to discuss? I got an announcement, but I want to see if you have any business.
I don't think I have anything right off the top of my head, although I will say that I think we have some exciting merch opportunities coming up, possibly in the relative
100%.
future. I've been doing some playing around with some new gadgetry, and I got some
As
ideas.
as have I. I will actually be selling a new line of T-shirts with some pretty cool images on them. So, hope you guys get ready for that. And my co-host here is got his hands on something really nice.
Oh yeah,
Really
like I don't want to
nice.
get anybody's hopes up just yet because I just finished the first couple projects with it that are just for testing purposes, but I got some really great ideas and I think we can do some real fun stuff. So if anybody is into real fun little knick-knacky things, we can make some knickknacks.
Also, coming up in October, I will be speaking at Mr. Les Odell's convention. So I hope you guys can make it out to Morgantown for that one. It's going to be a good time. I'm really looking forward to it. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and I actually have I want to say two more speaking things lined up. I'm just waiting to hear back from those two people before I
Mm.
announce them so they don't get fallen by the wayside or bad luck happens. But yeah, first speaking gig that I can confirm will be for October 8th in Morgantown, West Virginia. Thank you to Les Odell. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, are you guys coming?"
Mm.
I'm saying, "Yeah, hey, we'd like to." And I got to talking about speaking. He said, "You can speak at my event." And I said, "Let's do that. Let's make that happen." He said, "All right, you're set to go." And I was like, "Awesome."
There we
So
go.
I will have more information on that to you guys when it becomes available. Come, I don't know,
Mm.
probably August. I want to say
Yeah,
probably August.
because that's I think
Honestly,
usually when he starts putting in the serious work for it, and I think we're going to try to, if we can both manage the time to get there, I think we're going to try to film it, and either put that up on the Patreon or do something with it so that you guys can see it after the fact if you don't show up there yourselves.
yeah, it'd be fantastic. Or maybe do a live
Yeah, do something so that you
somehow.
guys see at least
Somehow
part of
do
it.
a live,
Maybe not the whole thing
and
because we want you to be there to see it in person, but
yes,
we'll let you into some snippets.
maybe up the whole thing for Patreon donors, or maybe give them a link to see it live. If I can figure out how to do that, we could have it up to where people would see it live, and I think that'd be pretty legit. Like the Patreon donors
Mm.
would see it live. And shouts
Yeah.
out to all of you Patreon donors. And matter of fact, we have been letting our Patreon donors pick the categories. And Leah Carpenter, one of our Patreon donors, picked Fairy and Faefolk for tonight. If one of our other Patreon donors has an idea, by all means, shoot it to my inbox at thisuncanny@gmail.com. Anybody else listening, feel free to shoot me suggestions in my inbox. Feel free. If you have an idea for a show, please let me know, and we will try to make that happen. Also, we have a YouTube page now. Yes, YouTube. Go over and find This Uncanny Earth Official on YouTube. You will see an awesome picture of our globe, and my banner is my shirt and a couple books that I have. I'm going to change that banner at some point, make it a little bit, clean it up a little bit, clean up the logo a little bit. Head on over there. We have clips up now from episode 179, Celtic Deities, and episode 152, Dyson Spheres and Stellar Engines. Also, we will have clips up of episodes 176 and 177, Angels in Christianity and Angels in Zoroastrianism, respectively. So, go check over there. Those will go up Wednesday the 9th. The episodes, full-length episodes, will be going up every Friday at 2 p.m. I have them all set to go at certain times, because the good thing about YouTube is you can set what time you want your clips to premiere or your videos to premiere. Depends.
Mm.
The clips, like I said, will go up every Wednesday, and those will be from different shows. What I'm going to do is cut clips from all of our shows, from our past 181 episodes, counting today. Then I will upload probably 2 from each show, maybe 3 from our 2-hour shows. I'd like to get our Sacred Relics episode, get that up probably See, today is the 3rd, so tomorrow will be the 4th. So what? It's the 11th. I want to say the 18th. Yeah, the 18th, because then the 18th and the 25th. So the 18th, I might have Sacred Relics and another episode up, and then the 25th might be Time Travelers and Immortal Beings. So, and we'll play that by ear. It just depends what I have to cut through, because some of our earlier stuff is a little bit rough. But I put it behind music too. There'll be 2 to 5 minute increments of, excuse me, each of our episodes. So maybe we'll do the John Titor. I don't know if we did that on Time Travelers, but we'll put that up as a clip, and then I'll find another from that and then put that up too. So we'll have a nice amount of clips. Then episodes will go up, and then we're going to start doing our Uncanny trips again now that the pandemic is kind of slowly weaning away and we can finally get back into the places that we couldn't get into before. So we'll be doing that. Then we will hit you with some of those. The Patreon donors will get a little bit more off of those trips. So if you're interested to become a Patreon donor, it's going to get real fun starting next month. We're going to be having some new stuff available for you guys. New merchandise for you guys to get from both of us. We're going to be doing new shirts. We're going to be doing new gadgetries, new thingamabobs, whatchamacallits, all that amazing stuff. So I hope you guys are ready for that, because I'm excited. I'm excited for this show to take the next step it should have taken back in 2020, and we did not get a chance to take those steps due to the spread. So we're hoping to get back into that. Speaking of news stories, we will not be getting into the situation going on in Europe right now. Do not expect that from us. It's not going to happen. We don't get all political on the show. We keep to ourselves about it. We have our own thoughts and opinions, and we do not bring that up on the show. So if you're looking for an episode regarding any of that, unfortunately, you're going to have to look somewhere else.
Right. No hot buttons. And when we get into stuff like conspiracy stuff, it's for entertainment and not for, true tinfoil hat wearing, like, crazy stuff. Okay?
Now, we did play around with the idea of having another show for the Patreon donors where we get into the more serious ideas and concepts. If you folks would like to hear that, our Patreon donors, or folks out there that are thinking on the fence, maybe I want to, maybe I won't, let us know. Because I'm still mulling it around in the back of my head. It'd be a good way to get our thoughts out, but without it being like crazy time. And we would probably, for our safety, maybe have it to where it's just streaming only, where you can't download it. And I'm not saying that you folks are bad people by any means, but I don't want to get a Patreon donor in that has ill intentions and then cuts up a bunch of them and says, oh, look, they're this and they're that and they're this and they're that. And maybe that's just an overthink on my end. But I always want us to be two things. One, who we are. And two, honest with both Patreon and the show itself. So maybe an Uncanny After Dark type of thing. I've been playing with it, and we've talked about it before, so yeah, I think we'll pull the trigger on that maybe here in the next couple of weeks, and it won't be anything crazy. It won't be anything where we're being extra. There might be some words, some strong language from some of us, and maybe have some guests on too. I know a couple of our previous guests had talked about having them on a show like that where they can speak. I don't want to say freely.
A little bit of debate, though, like
a little bit of debate, yeah.
With people that we know that we're already that we know, and we might not have the same opinion of things on, but we know we can talk to each other in a way that, while we're going to disagree, we're not going to start a fist fight.
Right, an on-air fist fight, even though that probably get a bunch of new Patreon viewers, donors, but yeah, just some things coming up and some things to look forward to, and we are going to do a much better job on the Patreon. We got kind of slammed on the whole pandemic thing, so that was really hard. So anybody that rocked with us on Patreon during that time and has still rocked with us and is still supporting us, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Mhm.
We really do, because it's tough. It's tough. Tonight, episode 181, Fairy Folk and Good People, is in my notes, not in the title, but that's my notes. Let's get to what a fairy actually is. A fairy, fae, fair folk, or good people are considered a type of mystical being found in the folklore of European countries, particularly in Celtic, Slavic, Germanic, English, and French folklore. They're described as metaphysical, supernatural, and preternatural, meaning outside or beside nature. As time and Christianity entered into these areas, the fairy races were considered to live beside humanity or were considered demonic entities. We have to remember the church influence of the time took both pagan ideas and the organized religion aspects and kind of smashed them together so people would get along. And there's some instances of that in modern day churches. And we can get into that maybe in the Uncanny After Dark. I don't want to offend anyone. We could do that in the Uncanny After Dark.
And we did. We talked a little bit about it with the Angels series, because we talked about how some of those things from other religions and spirits were like demonized or renamed and things like that. So
Yes, we sure did. Now, to get to the etymology of the word fairy itself, it originates from the Proto-Indo-European ba, meaning to speak, tell, or say. When it developed into Latin, it was fata, meaning the fates. It would then go into Old French and turn into fey, meaning fairy, and fairy, which was the land of the fairies, meeting of fairies, enchantment, magic, witchcraft, and sorcery. From Old French, it went to the Middle English term fairy. Fairy meant a country or home of supernatural or legendary creatures, fairyland. Also, something incredible or fictitious. It is from the Middle English the modern term fairy originates, and it means a mythical being of folklore and romance, usually having diminutive human form and magic powers, or relating to fairies. So we see how words get taken from one aspect and turned into another. And we've had this conversation on translations of different religious texts, i.e., the Bible is the big one.
Mm-hmm.
We have done multiple shows on different words and where words come from. And it's a very fantastic thing if you get into it. I believe we did the episode of Norse mythology where we talked about Futhark, I think is the name of it. Is it Futhark?
Futhark.
I might.
Futhark.
Futhark. Thank you.
Futhark.
Futhark. Futhark. You guys go listen to that.
Futhark.
Right.
This
Futhark
is the Futhark. You guys just aren't hip enough. Let me get my IPA and get my Futhark.
I'm gonna go to the summoning pits and see Fogoth the Untamed. That's
Fogoth
real
and
Futhark.
Futhark. And that's twisting some tongues around there.
I saw the Archon priest there. So that's where the word fairy comes from, and which always fascinates me when we have words like that and their origins. I like that kind of stuff. Now, the history of the Fae is very fascinating. Now, in episode 179, we talked of Celtic deities, and in some beliefs, these fairy or faefolk are said to be the children of the mother goddess Danu and are the Tuatha. We talked about the Tuatha in that episode. And the Tuatha are a divine race that appeared in the land of youth, or the Tir na Nog, which is an otherworldly realm in Celtic folklore. Now, it is said that the Tuatha went underground to avoid the Milesians, and the Milesians are the people who drove the Tuatha to, I don't want to say extinction, but like I said before, underground. Though there are a number of stories regarding why the Tuatha went under the earth. In one tale, a Mergen, a Milesian druid, judge, and fierce warrior, divided the land and allotted the underground to the Tuatha, while he and his people lived on the surface. In a second tale, it states that Danu sent the Tuatha to live in Tir na Nog and found homes under the earth for those that wished to stay. Still in the third story, the Tuatha didn't fight the Milesians at all. They knew through prophecy that the Milesians were destined to rule the island in the sixth age of the world, and thus they prepared their future homes on their various hills and would go there upon the Milesians' landing. The Tuatha that chose to stay and live in that area were called the Aes Sit, or the people of the mound. Something I find interesting here about this whole notion of the people of the mound. Mounds are quite fascinating. They're very interesting in that they're not just located in one country. We have them here, peppered out throughout the United States. We actually have one here in Ohio called the Great Serpent Mound, which is one of the most well known in Adams County. I've been there. Have you been there before?
I haven't yet. I've wanted to. It's definitely on the list, and I think at some point in the future we're going to do like a little group effort to try to get down there so we can do some, not really investigating, but just some, exploring.
We're looking to get a drone at some point, and I think that once we get a drone, that would really be beneficial for us. So yeah, I think that would be fun. And I've been there before. It's really cool. You climb up on this kind of scaffolding thing. I think I've said this before. And then you could see the whole thing. And they've said that the mound itself is a lot older, and the only reason they've dated it, or they dated it how they did, is because the tribes that were coming through would clean it as a sign of respect. So when another tribe would come through, it was a mess, they'd clean it, or like, I don't know how you would clean something like that if people aren't leaving their McDonald's wrappers and their big gulps laying everywhere. But I figure overgrown brush, things like that, they clear all that away. So I figured that's what happened. And they said it's a lot older based on the fact that people were just coming by and cleaning it up. And when they found it, it was probably at that point, or maybe word of mouth, that sort of thing. So we're definitely going to take a journey down there, probably this summer, actually. That's a good summer trip. We'll stop a couple places and check out a couple roadside stands, maybe get some good food. Well, that's not a maybe. We're definitely going to get some good food. And we'll video that. And the Uncanny Trip thing, as to break away here for a second, is going to be integral to the whole process of the show. And you guys are going to get a first-hand look. Our Patreon donors are going to get a first-hand look and then some in what we're doing. Just a little FYI for what's coming down the pipes there. Now, Faefolk and fairy. Now, a lot of people think of the word fairy. When I say fairy, what do you think of? Spider, what is like the first thing that comes to your head? An image, an image.
Well, the most common, and probably it pops into my head mostly because of pop culture, and it probably does the same for everybody else, even though, I've done a lot more research, just as you have. But when you first hear the word, you think about the small, pixie-sized people with the not really butterfly wings, but like, gossamer wings and that kind of thing, flying around with the pixie dust and all that kind of stuff. So you think kind of like the Peter Pan style Tinkerbell kind of thing.
Yeah.
And even though, you and I, like I said, we've done a lot more research just considering this show and everything, we know after a few minutes, we're like, okay, well, I don't think, I think it's a little different. But when you first hear that word, that's what pops in. That's like the archetypal fairy image.
Yes. Yeah, you are 100% right. Because for the longest time when I was a kid, that's the only thing I thought of. Tinkerbell style with the dragonfly wings.
Yep.
Because that's what I would equate them to, is more of a dragonfly than a... What did you say?
Well, I was thinking butterfly, and then I thought like gossamer wings and stuff. But like my daughter has watched the modern fairy cartoon things, and that's kind of the version that's stuck in my head. And they kind of stylized them a different way there. But yeah, you're probably more correct than the old in that imagery.
So the word fairy it's a catch-all. That's the best way I could phrase it. It's a catch-all term. And like you said, people often think of pixies as being fairies. But oddly enough, and the I didn't know this part. The following are considered fairies: brownies, dwarves, which I didn't know were considered fairies, elves, dryads, gnomes, goblins, leprechauns, sprites, trolls, and pixies can all be classified as part of the fairy race. That being said, that opens up the door of possibilities when you read about the war that they had there with, Balor and all of that and the Fomorians and that. This was a war much like Lord of the Rings, where you had all of these races
Mm-hmm.
coming out against each other, fighting humans, and humans fighting them. But when you read that Faefolk are the Tuatha, and you realize that a lot of this stuff was Tuatha based, you're like, wow, the Tuatha weren't just. Because when I thought Tuatha, I thought, Odin, Norse mythology, Norse pantheon. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
think elves, dwarves, even though elves and dwarves are in Norse mythology, but I pictured them as being completely separated.
Yeah,
And
more like the
here,
humanoid races.
yes, and here the Tuatha are all of that.
Mm-hmm.
They're elves, dwarves, and there's more. I'm going to get into more. That's just like a small amount. There's actually more
Mm-hmm.
than that. The first thing I'm going to talk about are brownies, and these are the household spirits. They're short. They're about 3 feet tall. They have pointed ears, brown complexion, and brown working clothes. Now, originally they were known for helping farmers. They did outdoor tasks like shoveling hay, feeding sheep, that sort of thing. And they are drawn towards hard-working families who need help. If a brownie is living with you, you should strive to keep your house nice and tidy. Now, they will help out with chores, but they want to make sure you're also doing your part. You feed brownies milk, cookies, and honey at night. I enjoy all of those things. They will also make friends with pets, and they love animal friends, and they generally love living around humans. You gotta have a nice, loving, and warm home, and as long as you're good to them, for the most part, they'll be good to you. And that's the thing about fairy and fae folk. A lot of people strike bargains with them.
Mm.
Some fairies are good, like the brownies. Some are more mischievous, like the pixies. And some are just downright evil, like the Scalia. And we'll talk about that in a moment.
Red caps.
Yes.
Red caps.
Pixies are up next. Now, this is the word that people think of when they think the word fairy. Tinkerbell from Peter Pan is the archetypical view of a pixie. Small humanoids with wings and humanoid features. Some dress in only green, others in blue or yellow. A lot of earth tones because they're earth spirits. And pixies can be drawn in by creating a woodsy area for them to live in, as pixies love nature. They enjoy contact with humans, but are cunning and can lead them astray. They can play some pretty harmful jokes on humans, but this is due to their lack of understanding regarding human emotions. They don't feel the same, they don't act the same as we do. They are known to steal stuff from your home or hide items. But if you treat them well, they will usually reciprocate in kind. They enjoy tiny houses, nectar, and honey. Very interesting aspect. And these are what are common when it comes to fairies, or what people know. The next one, this is another one I did not know was a fairy. The Banshee.
Mm-hmm.
Banshee is a female spirit that predicts death. Her cry is usually an omen, and she relatively takes on a couple different forms. A beautiful young lady, a stately matron, or an old ugly hag are just some of the examples. And she isn't usually seen, but rather heard. Her morning cries, not in the morning, but morning as in a passing of a loved one, are said to be haunting and bone-chilling. She usually runs a comb through her hair while she cries, and in some parts of Ireland, combs are thought to be bad luck because of the banshee. Now, banshees usually don't harm people through their cries, but their cries do predict death. If you hear a banshee crying, it doesn't necessarily mean it's your death she's predicting. It's just someone in your village's death she is predicting. Unless you live out in the middle of nowhere, then it might be a different story. I didn't know a banshee was considered a fairy either. I thought a banshee was more of a malicious spirit, and there are differences between spirits and fairies.
That's another one I think that that over time has kind of changed a little bit. Like the classic folklore considers them like fae folk, and then over time they became more like malicious evil spirits and things like that, depending on the arrival of the church and that kind of thing. And so it's really interesting to see some of these things evolve from how they started out.
I have to agree. In the comment section, big shouts out to in the comment section. Right. In the comment section, big shouts out to my guy Zach. He says, "Hey guys, hope you're having a great night. Sorry I'm late. My friend, you are never late when you're Uncanny. Always remember that. If you want to comment out there, please leave a comment and we will read them live on air."
He's like a wizard. He shows up precisely when he means to.
Yes. He's zacked off the gray. Or is he zacked off the white?
Ooh.
I don't know. That's
Depends on his power level.
Thing. Yeah. It might be over 5,000. It might be over 5,000.
Impossible.
Next up we have the Changeling. Now the Changeling is a fairy child that has been swapped for a human child. There's a variety of reasons why this may happen. For instance, a sickly fae child might be swapped for a human child, or because they want a beautiful human child and they feel their baby is either too ugly or the human child can strengthen their bloodline. Changelings usually have fairy-like features and have slight magical skill. They don't look like their parents, and they have trouble fitting into society. Funny story. I know somebody, and this person, they remind me of Faefolk. And me and another person, we've had a conversation about that. Very good people, very good folks. One we had as a guest, actually, a little while back. But that's been a common thing, I guess. That a lot of people say, "Hey, you look like one of the Faefolk." And I thought that was interesting. Funny enough about the Changeling, you have to wonder if this is true. When I was reading, they said they never really had a strong case for a Changeling. They ascribed this idea to high infant mortality rates during the times. So this kind of took that meaning and ran with it. It's still very interesting because if you've ever, I've met people that have features that don't look human, and you probably have too.
Well, like, even me, like my ears are slightly more pointy than most people. Like they're not like Vulcan or like true like elf ears, but they're a lot more like that than if you ever get a chance. And I don't want to be like weird and be like, "Hey, bro, look at my ears," but I mean, just
let me see them ears.
Just take a look. I mean, because they are a little bit pointier than the average ear, and it's not a lot to make people be like, "Man, that guy's got really pointy ears." It's just enough to be like, "That's kind of interesting."
Do you look like your parents though?
I look like my dad a lot. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it's over.
I can see it in the mirror. Like the last 5-10 years, like I'll look in the mirror and be like, "Oh, yep, there's dad." So there's no way, there's no changeling going on there. It's obviously some genetics, but it's just interesting because like you get people with these features, the ears, or even some people they have like slightly pointed canines, kind of like not like full vampire teeth, but they have slightly pointed teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Different things, you get people like that, and then that kind of fed in the old days. That would feed into the old changelings stories. They don't now so much because people are just like, "Oh, that's interesting." But back in the day, people used to be like, "Your ears are pointed, you must be Faefolk." Murdered.
Yikes.
Just like that, murdered.
They also said to attribute it to the lack of changeling stories, due in large part to how hard it is to actually switch out of child.
Yeah.
can't really do that these days. There's a lot of security measures in place at hospitals and things like that. And the one thing that Fae folk want to do is stay out of the limelight.
Mm.
Now, some of these you're like, well, some of them are harmful, yes, but they still don't want to be known. They want to do their harming as quietly as possible, is the best way I can put it. Inconspicuously. They don't want people to know they're doing it, and that's why you don't have the changeling aspect. And like I said, the changeling aspect too, yes. They don't
That's like a
known.
common thing. Invisibility is a really common ability of a lot of Fae folk.
Yes, especially like pixies,
Yep.
who will keep their homes shrouded through spells and things like that. So yes, 100%. Next one we're going to talk about, and this is kind of fascinating, the Dryad. The Dryad are fairies that are tied to trees, though they are not the actual spirit of the tree. However, if the tree dies, they will die with it. They don't typically travel far away from the trees and will do everything they can to keep their tree alive. They are most likely to speak with humans who take care of trees and the environment. If your trees have a human face, or you have a feeling of different energy shifts around said tree, you might have a Dryad. If you want to communicate with them, touch the tree and the ground with your bare feet. They're considered a sweet spirit, and if you are new to communication with Fae, this is the place to start. Fascinating, because we've all seen a tree with a face. I don't think I've met anyone that's not seen a face in a tree.
Well, one of our a pair of guests we had who were good friends of ours, one of which who isn't around anymore, Kevin and Jennifer Melick, they got into the subject. What was it called? It was like
pareidolia, where you see things that
yeah, and that's kind of where a lot of it's from. But a lot of it could also be something else. Like, and it's interesting because if you go through a forest and you look at the trees long enough, you can really start to see that kind of stuff.
You sure can. But some trees actually look like they have human faces.
Yeah.
That I have to be honest about, because some do look like that. I've seen trees that have that feature, and I know you've seen it too. Pareidolia, Pareidolia.
That sounds right. I kept thinking it was like parodontia, but that's something else. That's like something to do with teeth, I think, isn't it? I don't know. I don't remember. It's something different.
Pareidolia. That's what it looks like. Pareidolia. Huh. Interesting. Pareidolia. Which is basically seeing something like a face or an image in something that really isn't that. Like when people see Jesus in toast, which has happened.
Yep.
A figure in a Cheeto, which has happened.
Some of that stuff's gone on tour. You ever see that? You ever see the toast that went on tour? No, it was a cheese sandwich. It was like a whole cheese sandwich that they said that they saw the Christ in, and it went on a tour like across the United States. It was. I can't even say that like with a straight face too much. I got to stop because I'll just start laughing.
Some of it is sold on eBay for like $5,000 to $10,000. They sold a Cheeto. I forget who it looked like, for like $10,000.
There was like a nugget that looked like one of the characters from that Among Us game.
I remember that.
That was recent.
Those look like Among Us anyways. Nuggets
they look like a lump.
That.
Yeah, it's just like a lump. So it's like the nugget could have looked like anything, but it looks like a character from the game. Okay.
In the 90s, when McDonald's had good chicken nuggets, they made toy chicken nuggets, and they were different things. I don't remember what their occupations were, but they were different. And for some reason, Among Us reminds me of those chicken nuggets with the. I don't know if you remember this when they had the chicken nuggets.
Yeah, they had like a whole whole set of characters because they were like a whole group. Because you get like a 6-piece or whatever, and that's what they were supposed to represent. They were supposed to be like the 6-piece nuggets, but they were all characters.
Reminds me a lot of the California raisins. From that time.
Yep.
So there you have it, dryads. Kelpies are next, and these are scary water fairies that are thought to be cannibalistic and carnivorous. Kelpies eat deer off the shoreline as well as other fairies and even humans. Male Kelpies are thought to be shapeshifters and can turn into handsome men to lure young women into the water to trap or consume them. It takes the form of a horse when not revealing their true form. They live in oceans, rivers, and streams. The Loch Ness Monster may be a form of a Kelpie.
They have in Scotland. They have two giant statues that are called the Kelpies. That are like metal crisscross, like lattice work, in the shape of two horses, basically just from the neck up, and they're coming out of like a watery spot, like a one of the local lakes or something like that, and they're called the Kelpies, and that's pretty interesting too because they really embrace that culture and they really embrace that some of that folklore from their past. That's one of the things that I would want to see if I went on a trip out there. I just want to be like, wow, here we go, the Kelpies, and then hope that they didn't come to life and eat me.
I'm kind of hoping they would come to life and eat you, though.
Yeah, I know, you would.
Then we could film it and put it on the channel and get a bunch of views.
First the Kelpies, next the Wendigo. Who's next for our world tour beatdown?
Oh, the Wendigo. We're going to have to bring that back.
Yeah, he's still... we were going to do that thing with the fight with the bare knuckles and just pandemic.
Yeah. That was good. Oh, that was so good, too.
He's still on my list.
100%. You're on his.
Oh, yeah.
Salamanders. Crazy, right? Known as fire elementals, they can be really helpful if you're a witch working with fire. They appear as fiery lizards in red and orange tones, and although they are also known to show up as a classic fire fairy, they can also show up as a ball of firelight. They are considered some of the strongest elements. They are the spirit of fire, and they come to the aid of humans who, in fact, need their help, which is quite interesting, at least to me anyways. I thought that was
salamanders too, like that's a good example of something that's found in other cultures as a different form of creature too, because the same basic form is found in Middle Eastern mythology, because they hang around the city of brass with the jinn. You get the salamanders and things
hanging out in Aram with the pillars.
So
they also
super awesome, super interesting.
They also come to the aid of witches in areas of passion and revenge, as well as a physical manifestation of fire. They can be mischievous, so be careful when you work with them. Next up, we have two courts. The first one is the Seelie Court. This is one of the most well-known aspects of fairy lore. They are thought to be benevolent fairies who act as arbiters and judges in fairy disputes. Typically seen at twilight when they conduct courtly processions. They're active during the spring and summer. They enjoy beautiful things, such as stunning dresses and clothing, harmonious instruments, delicate flowers, and of course, dances. The Seelie Court is made up of the most beautiful types of fairies. They are somewhat friendly to humans, and they will seek help from humans if needed and return human favors. They will seek help from humans if needed and return human favors with kindness. They also have mischievous fairies. The Seelie Court is considered the good side, while the Unseelie Court the bad side, which leads me into the Unseelie Court. Now this one is considered the bad side of fairies. They attract the lower end of fae like bogarts and bogies. It is thought to be ugly and hideous. Now this is a court composed of dark fairies as well as lost spirits. They tend to be active during autumn, Halloween, and winter. Dark magic is often tied to the Unseelie Court, and they're known to work with witches and black magic. When they make deals with humans, they never work out well for the human. There is no considered good in mingling with the Unseelie Court, as there is no way to get along with those there. It is said they force humans to join because they can't reproduce, so they make the humans do it for them. Traveling through the woods at night may introduce an unsuspecting individual to the Unseelie Court, so it is best to watch your step. at night. You don't want to incur that kind of wrath. And lastly, we have the will-o-wisp. Now, the will-o-wisp is a type of fae that takes the form of a small firefly or flickering orb of light. These fae have been seen across the world and are known by different names in different cultures. They usually appear in groups over lakes and ponds, as they prefer the much calmer waters from both. They may also be found in earthly areas such as grassy hills or woodlands. And stories about the will-o-wisp say they only appear as lights, while other tales say they are the lanterns the fae carry around as they reveal. So there you go. We have a nice grouping of fairy folk, fae folk, that I didn't know existed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, as when I was a kid, everything is based off of, pixies and things, and gnomes even.
Yeah.
Because gnomes are also considered, goblins are considered, leprechauns. I didn't do leprechauns or gnomes because they are more widely known than banshees and dryads.
A quick
Kelpies.
interesting fact about leprechauns, though, is that the whole perception of them being like short, kind of like dwarfish, isn't entirely correct, because there's actually stories of leprechauns that are like full-size humans or bigger. Like sometimes they were like giants, but they can adjust their size. That's one of their powers. They can adjust their size, big and small, and things. So sometimes they appear small, sometimes they appear big, and it like our modern folklore kind of latched on to the fact that they're small, but they're not naturally small. They're naturally whatever size they want to be.
Oh, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
So, real quick, I want to get into an encounter, and if Spider has one, he can chime in on his. But this comes to us. Okay.
After you're done, you can go ahead.
This one. You done?
No, that wasn't sarcastic. That was for real. I was just like,
go ahead.
It sounded like after I said it, I was like, oh, he probably thinks I was taking a dig at him. No, go ahead.
No, I know, but we've been friends for that long. So we have a report from a good friend of ours, Teresa Cheshire. She is a paranormal investigator and historical research manager for Huntington Paranormal Investigations and Research, located in Huntington, WV. She is good friends with Les, and when you're friends with Les, you're basically friends with everybody else. So I put out a little blurb in both the group and on my personal wall, and she had reached out and said, yeah, I talk about this in my blog. So head on over to Teresa's Haunted History of the Tri-State.blogspot.com, and I think we've read things from here before. But I want to read this to you guys because she gave me permission to use it on the show. And I figured, you know what? I'm going to do that. So I'm going to take it from here and read you guys the whole experience. She says, I opened my front door and walked out on my porch stoop, but before I could step down off the stoop and onto the short paved sidewalk leading to the driveway, I was startled by some movement. I looked down, fully expecting to see one of the dozens of rabbits that live around my yard scurrying away. What I saw did scurry away, but as hard as my skeptical brain tries to rationalize it, I'm not so sure it was a bunny. Running from the direction of my house across the sidewalk and disappearing around the back of my car was a small creature. It was a light brown/tan color, very similar to our local rabbits. It stood a little under a foot tall, for my estimation. Being a late spring morning, sometime between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m., there wasn't full sunshine, but it certainly wasn't super dark out either. Plus, the porch light, while not super bright, was still turned on. Everything about this encounter screams rabbit to my rational side. It was about the same color and size as a rabbit, which are especially plentiful in my area around that time of year. It ran away like you'd expect a rabbit to do when a human suddenly pops up, and it could be argued that in early morning light I couldn't get that good a look at the thing. But I did. I was standing only about 8 feet away from the creature when it stopped and looked directly at me for what seemed like much longer than it actually was. I wasn't looking into the eyes of any rabbit species I've ever seen. What I saw was a fully formed little man. He was nude except for what looked like a tattered loincloth type garment, that was approximately the same color as his skin tone. He was barefoot. He had a somewhat stocky, not quite muscular build, and while he didn't seem dirty per se, he just seemed sort of weathered. I couldn't see what color his eyes were, although for a brief second he did look at me directly in the eye before running off on 2 feet, obviously. He didn't have a beard and he wasn't bald, but his hair seemed very sparse, very light, and very wispy. His face reminded me of a combination of Dobby, the house elf from Harry Potter, Hoggle from Labyrinth, and the Rust troll dolls from my childhood. It was heavily lined and creased, giving the creature a very old and wizened appearance. He seemed as shocked to see me as I was to see him. I also remember that his nose, while not huge, seemed to be the most prominent facial feature. Honestly, the description of it reminds me of a type of house spirit known as a brownie, or sometimes called a Robin Goodfellow. Now, Teresa goes on to say that she's had some other Fae-related instances, such as a fairy ring. Now, those of you who don't know what a fairy ring is, it's a ring of mushrooms that it makes a circle. The reason being, I guess, is due to the spores releasing from the mushroom. It releases in such a way that it just creates that circle. But it's wise to stay out of them, because you may be in there too long and then disappear and be lost in the Fey world forever. So be careful with that. Usually a child, in the earlier days, they would warn children because, like we said before, with changelings, things like that may occur. And I found that to be fascinating, and thank you to Teresa for allowing me to share her experience on tonight's episode. We're going to have to get her on the show at one of these points to have a conversation about what she does and all the haunted stuff that goes on. So thank you, Teresa. We appreciate you. What you got, Spider?
Well, I have an encounter from it was reported in 1937. So it's not ancient, but it's not as recent as that one, obviously. But it was reported.
How do you not have a 2022 encounter? I mean,
from just yesterday at 12 in the afternoon, right? But this one was reported to a real group that operated around this time called the Fairy Investigation Society of England. Now think about that for a second. It's 1937. There's a depression in America. It's not a fake thing. It was a real thing.
No, he believed in fairies too. You know that, right?
Right. But it could be like, I mean, he could be a member of that. I don't know. It doesn't list the membership. It's just really interesting that this is around the 20th century, where you would think people don't really believe this stuff as much anymore. But there's a whole, there's a society, the Fairy Investigation Society of England. So, interesting.
Not Sherlock Holmes, I'm sorry. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yeah, I kind of, it took me a minute, but I followed where you were going with that. But it doesn't list membership, like I said. But we might look up the membership at a later time, and I'll report on that maybe next week as like a follow-up at the beginning of next week. Because that'd be interesting to know. Because I don't know who was a member. We might really get some surprising names on this list. But anyway, they received a letter from a young woman. The article I have here, she's unnamed, but I'm sure if we did some digging, we'd probably find out. She'd experienced a strange encounter staying at an old house in Gloucester. Now, the house had a garden that attached to a nearby forest of birdlip beeches. And that's beeches, the tree, not beaches, the sand and the sun and the surf. Okay? Beeches, for anybody who wonders. One day, after she had washed her hair, the young woman walked to a nice sunny spot out of sight of the house to let her hair dry, and as she enjoyed the scenery, she felt an odd tugging in her hair. She turned to look and discovered a man, only 23 centimeters tall, dreadfully ugly and wrinkled, tangled up in her hair. His skin was the color of dead leaves, and he complained in a high, squeaky voice that she had no right to be there as he struggled with her hair. But the moment he freed himself, he disappeared. And that's the end of the letter. So, an interesting little encounter. I don't know how to take that. Like, I have to wonder first how long her hair was that she could turn around and see him in her hair. Because if my hair grows even, when my hair was at its longest, I couldn't turn around and look in my own hair. So, it would have to be down at least, chest, mid, back length. I don't know. and have him tangled up in it. But interesting stuff. I think the most interesting part about this story, again, is that it was reported to that society, the Fairy Investigation Society of England. And I would like to hear what else they received letters about, and if they were all in this fashion, or if they actually went out and did some on-hand investigating. I think that'd be pretty interesting.
We'll have to look into that for an upcoming episode, because we can always do another episode based on sightings alone. Because I found a few here and there. Some of them I had to kind of hold back my disbelief, because I'm like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. But
Yeah.
let me look at it with an open mind, because I don't want to go into this thing and be like, well, maybe it's nonsense, but maybe it isn't.
You never know.
That's
I mean,
what I think.
there's a lot of stories over the years, and there are, especially if you go on like a vacation in Europe, and you go to Scotland, you go to Ireland, and if you go to places in the UK, there are a lot of historical areas that have fairy stories attached to them. Like there's places in Ireland where they'll advertise, oh yeah, visit a real fairy ring, and you can go on a hike, and you can visit and things like that, and who knows. It's interesting. I think places like that have a lot more of that kind of history because they've been inhabited a lot longer than places like we do here. We don't have as many fairy stories here in the United States. Like we have like trickster spirits and we have things like that, but we don't have as much, which is a really interesting thing. And I don't know if anybody's done a real in-depth study as to why, but it could just have something to do with the age of the countries. Honestly, like we just might not be an old enough country to have that kind of folklore yet, and we had to have brought it over.
Well, there's Native American traditions about little people and similar aspects. Also, Scottish immigrants supposedly brought fairy and faefolk with them, much like in American Gods when they bring their gods and their spirits with them. But it's said that the Scottish immigrants brought fairy and faefolk with them, and they just sort of multiplied, and they're here now. You know what I mean? There's enough of them to be here. And I read a couple banshee, not sightings, but encounters, and people hearing the wailing and the screaming. Sometimes they can play that off as an animal, like maybe it's a raccoon in heat, or one of the many different animals that make kind of almost human-like sounds.
Around here, we get a lot of talk about, because we get coyotes and things, and people think, oh no, coyotes are a Western thing, but no, they're pretty much everywhere. And coyotes can make some pretty weird noises. Like they sound like people screaming or people crying sometimes. And maybe coyotes have like a mimicry that we don't really know about. It wouldn't surprise me. After all this time around like human settlements, maybe they have they've developed some kind of an almost mimicry, and they can sound like a human. So you go out and run. Oh, somebody's in trouble. Oh, I'm attacked by coyotes. But
I'm attacked by a coyote.
I mean, it sounds funny, but that's the kind of reason why they would develop something like that. You go out there.
This week.
But yeah, I mean, we don't take some of that stuff into account that animals here have kind of adapted in ways like that.
Right, 100%. Well, everyone, hope you guys enjoyed episode 181 of This Uncanny Earth. We strive each week to bring you the best in everything paranormal, esoteric, and supernatural. Next week's topic is TBD, to be determined. The week after that, we're going to have a St. Patrick's Day episode where we're going to talk about St. Patrick's Day. I think that's fitting to talk about because it'll be on St. Patrick's Day. So we're going to do a St. Patrick's Day episode on the 17th. So next week is to be determined. I want to kind of keep that Celtic idea going. So maybe we'll do festivals.
We're on a good run.
And the Roots Festival. So I think we'll do Celtic festivals next week. And then St. Patty's Day the week after that. And I think the 24th will... Because is March a 31st month? Yeah. March is the 31st month. So we'll have a show on what? That would be the 30th? 31st? I want to say 31st.
Let me take a look here.
Have a look.
31st. 31st.
So 31st. So yeah, I think the rest of this month we'll figure out if we have to, we'll do another episode on Celtic deities because there's a lot more than just the ones we mentioned. So we can always do a finishing up episode on that. But I think that March we're gonna use it for Celtic stuff and talk about that kind of stuff. So thank you guys for listening, tuning in. Head on over to our YouTube channel and subscribe and like and smash all the heck and like buttons you possibly can. And as always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We'll see you folks next week.